Penguin Random House Audio presents The Outlier, The Unfinished Presidency of Jimmy Carter, by Kai Bird. Read for you by Arthur Morey. Susan Goldmark. Not merely a muse, but a rabbi for life's imponderables. Prologue. The 91-year-old ex-president and Nobel Peace Prize winner walks briskly through the back hallway of the Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia, and enters the overflow room behind the church sanctuary. Waiting to catch a glimpse are more than 40 people, mostly tourists from various parts of America, who could not squeeze into the main sanctuary. They have all come to hear Jimmy Carter teach Sunday school. He's wearing his Sunday best, dark slacks, a rumpled brown tweed jacket, a purple and white plaid shirt. A bolo tie adorned with a turquoise clasp hangs around his neck. His black shoes are scuffed and unshined. Notoriously frugal, Carter buys some of his clothes from the local Dollar General store. "Tight as bark on a tree," quipped Dot Paget, the president's old South Georgia friend who organized Carter's famous Peanut Brigade of roving campaign supporters in 1976. Standing only 5 feet 7 inches, Carter was never a physically imposing man. In his prime, he projected an unassuming, mild-mannered demeanor. His style was studiously unpretentious. In the White House, he aspired to a distinctly austere, non-imperial presidency. Even in his 90s, his translucent blue eyes sparkled so sharply that he seems slightly intimidating. "Thank you for your service, Mr. President," exclaims someone. "Oh, well," Carter replies, "I'm still having a good time. In fact, this week we're going to Argentina, fishing." Grinning broadly, Carter takes a few questions as he waits to be introduced into the main sanctuary. Suddenly, from the front row, a woman asks, "Do you still hear from Mary Fitzpatrick?" Slightly startled by the query, Carter, eyebrows raised, answers, "Yes, she lives with us. She lives here in Plains and works for us 5 days a week." He pauses and looks quizzically at the stranger, who then offers, "Well, I was her lawyer." Carter turns to the crowd and explains, "Mary Fitzpatrick was in prison for life when I was governor." A murmur rises from the crowd as Carter continues, "She went to the governor's mansion to help us, and she's been with us ever since. When I was elected president, I got permission from the prison board to be her parole officer, so she went to the White House and lived there with us. She's a wonderful person." And then, as an afterthought, he adds in a matter-of-fact tone, "She was innocent." Mary Prince Fitzpatrick was a convicted murderer when, in 1977, at the age of 31, she moved into a bedroom on the 3rd floor of the White House living quarters. For the next 4 years, she served as the governess to the president's daughter, Amy. And when the Carters left the White House, defeated by the Hollywood film star-turned-California governor Ronald Reagan, their African-American nanny moved back with them to Plains, where she lives in a home bought for her by the Carters. Mary has worked ever since as the ex-president's housekeeper. Her story tells us something essential about the character and religious values of our strangely perplexing 39th president, but it also highlights an enduring mystery about how a product of the Old South, a white boy reared in a highly segregated, conservative rural society, came to personify decency and an uncommon humanitarianism in the White House. Carter is perhaps our most enigmatic president. He is often celebrated for what he has achieved in his 4-decade-long post-presidency. Conservatives and liberals alike accord him the accolade of the best ex-president. But most citizens and the punditocracy routinely label his a failed presidency, ostensibly because he failed to win re-election. But in truth, Carter is sometimes perceived as a failure simply because he refused to make us feel good about the country. He insisted on telling us what was wrong and what it would take to make things better. And for most Americans, it was easier to label the messenger a failure than to grapple with the hard problems. Ultimately, Carter was replaced by a sunny, more reassuring politician who simply promised that he would make America great again. Conventional wisdom has not given high marks to Carter's presidency. One historian described him as an utter failure as a national leader. Another historian labeled his a mediocre presidency. He was long on good intentions, complained this historian, but short on know-how. Gore Vidal called him a decent man, if an inept politician. He is also perceived as a weak or hapless executive, the victim of runaway inflation, a militant ayatollah, and even a killer rabbit. Much of this is a simplistic caricature. No modern president worked harder at the job, and few achieved more than Carter in his one term in office. Both his domestic legislative record and his radical foreign policy initiatives made his presidential term quite consequential. As a politician, most of the time he was a non-politician, uninterested in the cajoling and deal-making of Washington. This made him both an outsider and an outlier, a person or thing situated away or detached from the main body or system. Far from being weak or indecisive, Carter repeatedly demonstrated his willingness to make tough decisions despite the predictable political consequences. It may have been naivete, but he invariably rebuffed his advisers when they cautioned him to do something because it was politically popular. They knew he was just as likely to do the opposite. Indeed, he displayed in the Oval Office an unbending backbone and moral certitude in dealing with such politically fraught issues as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Panama Canal, nuclear weapons, the environment, and consumer protection. His greatest foreign policy triumph, the Camp David Accords, which led to a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, never would have happened but for Carter's vision. His insistence on lecturing the Soviet apparatchiks about human rights contributed more to the disintegration of the Soviet system than did Ronald Reagan's reckless spending on Star Wars. He anticipated the end of the Cold War and proclaimed an end to our inordinate fear of communism. He asked us to think critically about the hubris of American exceptionalism. In the aftermath of defeat in Vietnam, he asked us to beware of foreign interventions. Carter refused to take us to war, even when the Iran hostage crisis posed an existential threat to his own re-election. He was, as Gary Wills has argued, the first American president to take seriously the entire post-colonial era that has remade the globe since World War II. This was why he was willing to ram through the unpopular Panama Canal Treaty. He understood that America could not engage with this new post-colonial world without relinquishing its own colonial outpost in the Panama Canal zone. Against the advice of his inner circle, he hired Paul Volcker to strangle inflation, knowing full well that the Princeton-educated economist intended to make the economy scream as he faced re-election. Carter antagonized entrenched corporate interests by deregulating the airlines, the trucking industry, and railroads. Deregulation benefited millions of consumers, but it also tended to weaken labor unions, a core constituency of the Democratic Party. He forced through auto safety and fuel efficiency standards over the opposition of the Detroit auto companies. Seat belts and airbags would become mandatory and save thousands of lives each year. Environmentalists cheered when he placed millions of acres of Alaskan wilderness under federal protection, even as he accepted that most Alaskans were outraged. For Carter, it was simply the right thing to do. Carter stubbornly spent much of his political capital in his first term, acting as if he were a second-term president, which helps to explain the outcome of the 1980 election. His relentless pursuit of what he thought was a virtuous agenda made him political enemies. Southern conservatives turned on him for his determination to remake the judiciary, elevating more African Americans.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?